The year is 1943. Deep in the heart of America's industrial corridor, a small group of men in olive-drab uniform steps off a military transport. They move with the practiced discipline of career soldiers, but something in their eyes betrays uncertainty. These are not American GIs. They are German generals, once the architects of Blitzkrieg, the masterminds of Europe's conquest. Now they are prisoners of war, about to witness something that will shatter everything they believed about their enemy. General Friedrich von Paulus, the man who surrendered at Stalingrad, squints against the midday sun as he approaches the gates of the River Rouge complex. Behind him, Generals Walter von Seydlitz and Arthur Schmidt follow in uncomfortable silence. They've been told they're being taken on a tour of American facilities. They have no idea they're about to see the beating heart of the world's most powerful war machine. What happens next will haunt these men for the rest of their lives. The massive gates swing open, revealing an industrial landscape that defies comprehension. The Rouge complex stretches beyond the horizon, a mechanical metropolis of steel and steam covering more than 1,000 acres. The noise hits them like a physical force. Not the sporadic hammering of German workshops, but a continuous, thunderous symphony of mass production that makes the earth itself vibrate beneath their feet. "Mein Gott," whispers one general, the words lost in the mechanical roar. Their American escort, Colonel James Mitchell, watches their faces with grim satisfaction. He's seen this reaction before. These are men who commanded armies, who believed they understood industrial warfare. But nothing in their experience has prepared them for this. The first shock comes at the assembly lines. In German factories, they'd grown accustomed to seeing workers meticulously crafting individual components by hand. Here, an endless river of automotive chassis flows past at mechanized precision. Every 90 seconds, not minutes, but seconds, a completed vehicle rolls off the line. The generals stop walking. They simply stare. General Schmidt pulls out a small notebook and begins calculating frantically. His face grows pale as the numbers mount. In the time they've been standing there, perhaps 10 minutes, more vehicles have been completed than some German factories produce in an entire week. "This is just one line," Colonel Mitchell mentions casually. "We have 12 others running simultaneously." The notebook slips from Schmidt's fingers. But the Rouge complex is merely the opening act of their education in American industrial might. Over the following days, they're taken to see the full scope of what they're fighting against. At the Willow Run bomber plant, the sight that greets them destroys any remaining illusions about American capability. The assembly line stretches for nearly a mile inside a single building. B-24 Liberators, the heavy bombers that have been devastating German cities, move along the line like toys on a child's conveyor belt. But these aren't toys. These are 4-engine death machines, each one capable of carrying 5,000 pounds of explosives deep into the heart of the Reich. General von Paulus, who once commanded the 6th Army in its assault on Stalingrad, stands transfixed. He watches as workers, many of them women, install engines with practiced efficiency. In Germany, building a single bomber required weeks of careful craftsmanship by highly skilled technicians. Here, one rolls off the line every hour, every single hour. "How many factories like this do you have?" von Paulus finally asks, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is one of several," Mitchell replies. "We're also producing fighters, transport aircraft, and naval vessels at similar rates across the country." The German general's legs nearly give out. The mathematics are incomprehensible. If this is just one factory among many, if America is producing bombers at this rate from multiple facilities, then the war effort Germany faces isn't just superior, it's insurmountable. The psychological impact deepens when they visit the steel mills of Pittsburgh. These aren't the modest foundries they know from the Ruhr Valley. These are industrial cathedrals where molten metal flows like rivers of fire. The heat is overwhelming, the scale breathtaking. Rivers of liquid steel pour into molds the size of railroad cars, destined to become the armor plating for tanks, the hulls of destroyers, the framework of bombers. Here, General von Seydlitz has his moment of devastating clarity. He spent months in captivity telling himself that German engineering superiority would eventually overcome American numerical advantages. German tanks were better designed, German aircraft more sophisticated, German soldiers more skilled. Quality would triumph over quantity. But standing before the roaring blast furnaces of Pennsylvania, watching American steel production that dwarfs anything in Europe, he finally understands the terrible truth. America isn't just producing more, they're producing better, faster, and with seemingly unlimited resources. "We were fighting a factory," he whispers to Schmidt that evening in their quarters. "Not a country, a factory." The final blow comes at the Chrysler Tank Arsenal in Detroit. Here, Sherman tanks roll off production lines with the same mechanical precision they witnessed at the automobile plants. These aren't the handful of vehicles German factories might complete in a week. These are dozens per day, hundreds per week, thousands per month. General Schmidt, still clutching his notebook filled with impossible calculations, asks the question that's been haunting all of them. "How long have you been producing at these rates?" "Since 1942, Mitchell answers matter-of-factly. "We're just hitting our stride now. Production will double again next year." The silence that follows is deafening. These men begin to grasp not just the magnitude of American industrial power, but the timeline. While Germany struggled to maintain production under constant bombing, while German factories worked with increasing desperation and dwindling resources, America had been building the largest industrial war machine in human history, and they'd been doing it safely, efficiently, and with room to grow. The psychological transformation is complete when they're shown the shipping statistics. Every month, thousands of these tanks, aircraft, and vehicles aren't just being produced. They're being sent to multiple fronts simultaneously, to Britain, to the Soviet Union, to the Pacific Theatre, while still maintaining full equipment for American forces. Germany, they realise, hasn't just been fighting America. They've been fighting America's surplus capacity. In the quiet of their quarters that night, the generals finally confront the implications. General von Paulus, who surrendered an entire army at Stalingrad, understands that his defeat wasn't just tactical or strategic, it was inevitable. The enemy they had underestimated as soft, materialistic Americans had built a war machine that could outproduce the entire Axis combined. "We never stood a chance," von Seydlitz admits in a moment of brutal honesty. "Not from the moment America entered the war." General Schmidt nods, his notebook now filled with numbers that spell out Germany's doom in stark mathematical terms. Hitler spoke of American decadence, of a nation that couldn't fight, but we were the ones who were blind. They weren't soft, they were preparing. The irony cuts deep. German strategic planning had always emphasized efficiency, precision, and technological superiority. They'd built the world's most sophisticated war machine through careful engineering and tactical innovation. But they'd fundamentally misunderstood the nature of industrial warfare in the 20th century. The Americans had built something far more powerful than sophisticated weapons. They'd built sophisticated production systems. While Germany crafted individual masterpieces of military engineering, America had mastered the art of mass-producing victory itself. These captured generals returned to their quarters each night, carrying a burden heavier than their defeat. The knowledge that they'd led their nation into a war that mathematics alone made unwinnable. They'd committed the most fundamental error in military strategy. They'd catastrophically underestimated their enemy. The visits continue for weeks. each new facility adding another layer to their education in American industrial dominance. Shipyards where destroyers slide into the water every few weeks, aircraft plants where different types of fighters are produced simultaneously, ammunition factories where artillery shells are manufactured by the millions. But perhaps the most crushing revelation comes not from what they see, but from what they learn about timing. This incredible industrial capacity didn't emerge overnight in response to war. It had been building for years, quietly, steadily, while German intelligence dismissed America as unprepared for serious conflict. The transformation from peacetime automotive production to wartime manufacturing wasn't a desperate conversion. It was a carefully planned evolution. The same assembly lines that once built family cars now produce tanks with barely modified techniques. The same factories that manufactured civilian aircraft now craft bombers using identical production methods. America hadn't just mobilized for war, they'd mechanized victory itself. General von Paulus, in his final interview before being transferred to a permanent POW camp, delivers his assessment with the stark honesty of a man who has seen the future. We fought with the tactics of the previous century against the industrial power of the next. The American war machine isn't just bigger than ours, it's a different kind of machine entirely. As their tour concludes, these German generals understand they've witnessed something unprecedented in military history. Not just superior production, but a fundamental reimagining of how wars are won. Victory no longer belongs to the side with the best soldiers or the finest weapons. It belongs to whoever can produce the most weapons, fastest, while maintaining quality and innovation. The psychological weight of this knowledge will follow them for the remainder of their lives. They return to captivity carrying the burden of understanding exactly how thoroughly they'd misjudged their enemy. Every day they'd spent in command, every tactical decision they'd made, every strategic calculation they'd performed, all had been rendered meaningless by an industrial reality they'd failed to comprehend. In the years following the war, these men would struggle to explain to fellow Germans how complete their miscalculation had been. How do you describe witnessing the automated production of defeat? How do you convey the psychological impact of realizing that while you were fighting battles, your enemy was manufacturing victory? Their testimony would become part of the historical record, but the full emotional impact of their realization, the moment when professional soldiers discovered they'd been outmatched not by better generals or superior tactics, but by superior mathematics, remains one of the most profound psychological defeats in military history. The German generals had seen the face of modern warfare, and it looked like an assembly line.